Nobody really paid attention to the old piano in the corner of the hospital lobby. It had been sitting there for years, right next to a fake plant that nobody watered because it was fake, and a notice board full of flyers that were so old, some of the events on them had happened 2 years ago. The piano was just there, like furniture, like wallpaper. People walked past it every single day and never gave it a second look. The nurses didn't touch it. The doctors definitely didn't touch it. Patients who came in holding their backs or cradling their arms would sometimes glance at it for half a second. 10 Luke away. Visitors rushing in with flowers and worried faces had no time for pianos. And the security guard at the front, a big, quiet man who had worked there for over a decade, had gotten so used to seeing it that he genuinely forgot it was there most days. It was just a piano in hospital that nobody played. Until one Tuesday afternoon in November. The weather that day was the kind of gray that makes everything feel a little heavier. The sky wasn't storming or dramatic. It was just flat and dull, like a ceiling that had come down too low. People coming through the hospital doors were shaking the cold off their coats and rubbing their hands together. The lobby was doing what hospital lobbies do, buzzing quietly with that strange mix of urgency and waiting. Someone was being called over the intercom. A child was asking her mother a question that her mother didn't have the energy to answer. A man in the corner was staring at his phone but not really looking at it. And then the doors opened, and an older woman walked in. She was in her late 60s. Silver hair, simply kept, a plain gray coat. She wasn't limping or rushing. She wasn't looking around the way people do when they're lost or looking for someone. She walked in calmly, looked around the lobby for just a moment, and then, as if she had made up her mind about something, she walked straight toward the piano in the corner. The receptionist glanced up, then went back to her screen. The woman sat down on the old bench, set her small handbag on the floor beside her feet, and placed both hands on the keys. There was a brief second where nothing happened, just a woman sitting at a piano, in a hospital on a gray Tuesday, and then she started to play. What came out of that piano was not what anyone in that lobby was expecting. It wasn't a nursery rhyme. It wasn't something cheerful and polite. It wasn't the kind of playing where you smile and nod and go back to what you were doing. It was Chopin, a nocturne, the kind of music that doesn't ask for your attention. It just takes it quietly, completely, without asking permission. The sound moved through the lobby the way certain smells do. You don't see it coming. You don't choose to notice it. You just suddenly realize it's already inside you. The notes rose and fell slowly, like breathing, like someone saying something very important in a language you don't speak, but somehow you understand every word. The receptionist stopped typing. The security guard looked up from the corner. A nurse who had been walking quickly toward the elevator slowed down, then stopped. She stood there in the middle of the lobby holding a clipboard she forgot she was holding. The man who had been staring at his phone put it face down on his knee, one by one. Without anyone organizing it or announcing it, the whole lobby just stopped. Stop. There was a young boy, maybe 15 or 16, sitting in one of the far-waiting chairs. He had been there for hours. His father had been taken into surgery that morning, and nobody had come out to tell him anything yet. He had spent those hours trying to look calm, trying to look older than he was, staring at the floor, staring at the ceiling, going to get a cup of water. He didn't drink, coming back and sitting down again. When the music started, he didn't look up right away, but after a minute, something happened to his face. The tightness around his jaw loosened. His shoulders, which had been pulled up toward his ears without him realizing it, slowly dropped. His eyes got glassy. He blinked, looked at the piano, looked at the woman playing it, and then, very quietly, he started to cry. Not in an embarrassing way. Not loudly. Just the kind of crying that happens when you've been holding something tightly for too long and something beautiful comes along and, for just a moment, you forget to keep holding it. He wiped his face quickly, looked around to see if anyone noticed. Nobody was looking at him, because almost everyone else in that lobby was doing the same thing. An older gentleman near the window had his eyes closed. His wife was somewhere in this hospital getting test results that neither of them had talked about out loud, but both of them had been terrified of 4 weeks. He hadn't cried once in those weeks. He was from a generation that didn't do that. You stayed strong. You kept it together. You dealt with things. But sitting there with that music wrapping around him, his chin trembled. Just once. He pressed his lips together hard, but his eyes, when he finally opened them, were wet. A hospital cleaner, pushing a cart down the side hallway, stopped walking. She leaned against her cart and listened. She had worked in this hospital for 8 years. She had seen a lot of things in these hallways, things that stay with you, things you take home at night whether you want to or not. She was not a woman who cried eyes, but something about the music in T.I.'s plays on this particular afternoon hit differently. She turned her face slightly away from the lobby and just let herself feel it for a moment. Even the security guard, that big, broad-shouldered, seen everything man, had to clear his throat and look at the ceiling for a second. The woman at the piano played like she wasn't thinking about being watched. Her eyes were sometimes closed, sometimes just soft and distant. Her hands moved across the keys, the way hands move when they've known something for a very long time. Not carefully, not mechanically, but the way you'd move around your own home in the dark. Easily, naturally. From memory that lives in the fingers, not just the brain. She wasn't performing. That was the thing. There was no showmanship, no dramatic pauses for effect, no glancing up to see how people were reacting. She was just playing. For herself, maybe, or for the room, or for something she felt that morning when she woke up and decided, for reasons she couldn't fully explain, to come here. The music lasted about 4 minutes. 4 minutes is not a long time. You can watch 4 minutes of something on your phone and feel nothing at all. But those 4 minutes in that hospital lobby felt like something completely different. They felt like a door opening in a wall you didn't know had a door. When the last note finally faded, and it faded slowly, the way good music does, like it doesn't want to leave, the lobby stayed quiet. Not the usual hospital quiet, where the silence is just the gap between one noise and the next. This was a different kind of quiet. The kind that happens after something real. It lasted about 5 seconds. And then someone began to clap. Softly at first. Then a few more people joined. Then more. The woman at the piano sat still for a moment. Then she turned around on the bench, looked at the small crowd that had gathered without anyone noticing it gather, and she smiled. Not a big smile, just a real one. And somewhere across the lobby, the teenage boy who had been trying so hard to look older than he was caught her eye. And she gave him a small nod, the kind that says, "Asterisk, I see you. You're going to be okay." Asterisk, and nodded back. He believed her. The applause hit him like a wave. He opened his eyes, and for a second, just 1 second, he genuinely didn't understand what he was seeing. There were people, so many people, standing in a wide half-circle around the piano, clapping, some of them cheering, some of them just standing there with wet eyes and soft expressions, the kind of look people get when something reaches them in a place they didn't know needed reaching. He sat completely still on that worn piano bench and looked out at all of them. His first instinct, and this says everything about where he was in life at that moment, was embarrassment. Not the good kind of surprised embarrassment where you smile and wave. The deep kind. The kind that makes you want to shrink. He had spent the last 8 months feeling like a burden, like someone who had nothing left to offer the world. And now suddenly 100-and-something strangers were staring at him and clapping, and he had absolutely no idea what to do with that. He stood up, mumbled something, gave a small, awkward nod toward the crowd. Then he picked up his cold coffee from the floor where he had set it down without thinking, and he started walking toward the exit. Old habit. Disappear before anyone can get a good look at you. But the crowd wasn't ready to let the moment go. A few people reached out as he passed a pat on the shoulder. A handshake. A woman who said that was my mother's favorite song too, and had to stop herself from saying anything else because her voice was already going. He kept nodding, kept moving, kept his eyes down. He almost made it to the doors. "Excuse me." He turned around. She was standing a few feet away. A woman in her early 40s, professional looking, a laptop bag over one shoulder and a phone in her hand. She wasn't smiling the way the others had been smiling. She had a different kind of expression. Focused. Like someone who has just seen something and is already thinking 3 steps ahead. "I have to ask you something," she said. "How long have you been playing?" He paused. Thought about it honestly. "I haven't," he said. "Not for 17 years. She looked at him for a long moment without saying anything. Then she looked down at her phone, then back at him. "I filmed it," she said. "The whole thing. I hope that's okay." He shrugged. It hadn't even occurred to him that anyone would film it. "Sure," he said. "It's fine." She nodded slowly, still with that thinking expression on her face. She handed him a small card, the kind that just has a name and a number. Nothing flashy. She worked in the music industry. Had done for years. She had been walking through that station on her way to a meeting she was already late for, and she had stopped walking the moment she heard the first phrase come off those keys. She hadn't moved until the last note faded. "I'm not going to make you any promises," she said, honestly, "but I'd like to talk when you're ready." He looked at the card, put it in his jacket pocket, said okay. Then he walked out of the station into the cold November air and stood on the pavement for a while, not really sure where to go or what had just happened. He went back to his brother's place, sat down on the couch. Didn't say anything for a long time. That evening, she posted the video. The caption was short, something simple about a man who stopped an entire train station without a microphone, without a stage, without warning. Just a piano and something real. By midnight, it had 4 million views. He didn't know this yet because he had fallen asleep on the couch with the TV on, the way he did most nights. His brother saw it first, woke him up at midnight with the phone inches from his face, eyes wide, saying his name over and over until he sat up. He squinted at the screen, watched himself play, watched the crowd gather, watched the woman near the back press her hand to her mouth. He watched it twice without saying a word. "That's you," his brother said. "Unnecessarily. But sometimes people say unnecessary things because silence feels too big." "Yeah," he said quietly. "That's me." By the next morning, it was everywhere, not just millions of views. The comments, that's what got him. He sat on that couch, reading them one by one, and it wasn't the praise that undid him. It was the stories. Hundreds of people writing about their own grief, their own instrument gathering dust in a spare room, their own mother, their own loss, their own Tuesday where everything felt gray and pointless. People from countries he'd never been to, writing in languages he couldn't read, but he could feel what they meant anyway. One comment read, "I haven't cried since my dad's funeral 2 years ago. I just cried for 10 minutes watching a stranger play piano in a train station. Thank you for that." He had to put the phone down after that one. He sat with his elbows on his knees and stared at the carpet for a while. He hadn't thought of himself as someone with something to give for a very long time. He had thought of himself as someone quietly running out of options, running out of time, trying to take up as little space as possible while he figured out what was left. And then one Tuesday, with no plan and no audience and no intention, he had sat down at a tired old piano and accidentally reminded 100 strangers, and then millions more, that beauty still exists, that it doesn't disappear. It waits. The messages kept coming. A television program reached out. A record label sent a long, carefully worded email. A charity that works with people going through grief and loss asked if he would be willing to share his story publicly, saying they thought it could help people who were struggling in silence. He read every message, answered very few of them at first. It was all too fast and too loud and too much the opposite of what his life had been for the past several months. But he did call her. The woman from the station. He called the number on the card. They talked for almost 2 hours. She didn't try to sell him anything or rush him toward a decision. She just asked him questions. About his mother, about the piano, about what it had felt like to play again after all those years. He answered honestly, which surprised him, because he wasn't usually the kind of person who talked about things like that. At one point she asked him what he wanted, not what he thought was realistic, not what made sense given his situation, just what he wanted. He was quiet for a moment. "I think I just want to play," he said. "I didn't realize how much I missed it until I did it again." "Then start there," she said. "Simple as that." He didn't become famous overnight. Life doesn't actually work that way. No matter what it looks like from the outside. There were no instant transformations, no dramatic before and after. But things did shift, slowly, quietly, the way real change usually happens. He started playing again. Not for cameras or crowds, just for himself. At first, his brother's neighbor had an old keyboard and let him use it whenever he wanted. He would sit there in the evenings after dinner and play, Sometimes songs he knew. Sometimes things that just came out of his hands without a name. One night his brother stood in the doorway listening for a while without saying anything. When the song ended, he just said, "Mom would have loved that." He nodded, hands still resting on the keys. "I know," he said. "That's why I played it." Some doors, once they've been closed for a long time, don't need to be knocked down. They just need one quiet moment, one small act of courage, one ordinary Tuesday when you finally stop walking past the thing that was always meant for you. He had spent 17 years walking past that piano. He wouldn't make that mistake again.